So with me here today, I've got Dr. Eric P. Barron, who is a DO and a staff ABPN board certified neurologist and a United Council neurological subspecialties diplomat in headache medicine at the Cleveland Clinic Neurological Institute Center for Neurological Restoration, Headache and Chronic Pain Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. He's a clinical assistant professor at Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University. He completed his neurology residency in 2009 at Cleveland Clinic, where he served as chief neurology resident, followed by a headache medicine fellowship in 2010, also at the Cleveland Clinic. He's been named one of America's top physicians from 2012 to 2016. He's an author of the popular neurology board review book, Comprehensive Review in Clinical Neurology, a multiple choice question book for wards and boards, and has authored many publications across a broad range of topics. Dr. Eric Barron, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Migraine World Summit.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, are there any competing interests you might like to disclose before we get started?
A few things I want to just mention that, first of all, everything that we're discussing today should be considered off-label, meaning that the FDA has not approved anything we're talking about today for treatment of any treatments such as headache and migraine pain. In the United States here, cannabis is still considered to be illegal at the federal level, despite about half of the United States individually legalizing medicinal use. Otherwise, I have no disclosures for any specific products discussed today. Full disclosure, I do own a little bit of some stock in a company called Sun Biotech, which is a developmental company who's hoping to get involved in the medical cannabis space, currently not operational. So really irrelevant overall to what we're talking about today.
Great. Now, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am from the Cleveland area here. I did as you mentioned, I did my neurology residency here in Cleveland, Cleveland Clinic, and I did my headache and facial pain fellowship after that. I see primarily headache and facial pain at this point. We're in a group with a chronic pain center as well, besides just headache. So we have a lot of chronic pain patients, and many of the patients that we see have been all over, coming here for fifth opinion type of things. And, many of them have failed virtually everything almost. And so some of the patients have told me about these treatments that we're going to talk about being helpful for them despite failing everything else. And it kind of got my interest going. And so I ended up writing this paper about this last June. And, the research is interesting. And so it's kind of become an interest area of mine. And I'm hoping to get some more research in the area going here soon.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about what is a controversial and sometimes quite a heated subject around medical cannabis or marijuana. What is the history of medical cannabis use in medicine?
Well, what I'd like to try to do is summarize a little bit the medicinal history in conjunction with some of the political history. And these topics really go hand in hand in terms of understanding the evolution of medicinal use and understanding the current state of where cannabis science is at. So medicinally, cannabis use really goes back to ancient times. It has an origin in Western Central Asia, and it's documented throughout the Hindi literature. There were many prominent Greek physicians recommending for various ailments. 5,000 years ago, Chinese physicians were using cannabis for childbirth pain, joint pains. So fast forward to 1839 is really when the relevance comes into play here. So Dr. O'Shaughnessy was a physician who first introduced the Western world to medical cannabis. And he spent several years in Calcutta, India as a professor, as a physician. And he became aware of this while he was there and brought it back to Europe. And he really advocated for its use in analgesia and pain relief and muscle relaxants. So from about the mid-1800s to about early 1900 or so, there were many prominent physicians prescribing cannabis, including Sir William Osler, who we know is the father of modern medicine. And they were using it really for both acute and preventive use of migraine. And when I say acute, I mean, taking something as needed at the beginning of a headache versus preventive, meaning you're taking something daily or routinely to try to prevent or lessen the frequency and severity of migraine attacks. 1845, cannabis preparations were being listed on the U.S. dispensatory here. They were being produced by Bristol Myers Squibb, by Park Davis, by Eli Lilly, large manufacturers who still are in existence today. And then came 1930. In 1930, a man named Harry Anslinger, who led the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which later became the DEA, he led a campaign against cannabis. And what he did was he tried to associate cannabis use with psychosis, violent crime, addiction. He claimed this it was a drug of abuse used by minorities and low-income communities. There were a lot of other agendas that were suggested as causes for this transition. So basically what this led to was the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. This gave large fines and prison time to anyone associated with cannabis use or hemp. And the American Medical Association strongly opposed this bill, notably. Despite that, in 1941, cannabis preparations were taken off of the U.S. national formulary here. In 1970, the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 really was the final nail in the coffin. And what this did was it changed marijuana to a Schedule I substance, which basically is the quote most dangerous substance category. This is lumped in with LSD and heroin and these kind of drugs. So the DEA, or the Drug Enforcement Agency here, refuses to remove cannabis from Schedule I, and they claim that there's no accepted medicinal benefits for it, similar to LSD and heroin. The issue is that this prevents federal funding for research. It makes it illegal to proceed with research in order to even try to prove or disprove these claims that there's no medicinal use. And we've really been stuck in this position since that bill. Now, I will say in 1976, there was a very limited availability of cannabis through the FDA's Investigational New Drug Program. And this program actually came into play. There was a glaucoma patient who sued the government on grounds that the cannabis was preventing glaucoma and vision loss. And he actually won the case. So this program was started. It was later closed in 1992 by the Secretary of Health and Human Services here in the U.S. At the time of closure, there were 13 patients in the program. Last I knew, there were still 2 in the program. One of those patients was in there for a painful bone tumor disorder. The others for glaucoma. So they've been receiving monthly government supplied marijuana, interestingly. And the cannabis source has always been from a farm at the University of Mississippi, who's had a contract with the federal government since 1968. And this program is still controlled by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. So, getting into current times, 1996, California became the first state here to pass the Compassionate Use Act, which allowed for medical marijuana. Since that time, there's been a lot of medical associations which have urged the government to reschedule from Schedule I to Schedule II, because this would allow us to actually research, and it would also allow patients who have really failed conservative standard treatments to have it as an option. Some of these groups that have advocated for this transition of scheduling have included the Epilepsy Foundation, the American Medical Association, American Academy of Neurology, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Journal of Public Health. There's been a couple prominent journals that have also written editorials. And, at this point, we have 23 states, including Washington, D.C., who have voted to legalize medicinal use. There's 4 states, including Washington, D.C., which have voted to legalize both medicinal and recreational use. And then there are 16 states that have passed CBD-only bills. CBD is the one of the components of marijuana, which has a lot of the benefits, has no psychoactive qualities. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So it's clearly evolving, and it doesn't look to be stopping down. And so, physicians really need to become aware, because patients are going to be asking about these treatments in these states. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
Wow. What an amazing coverage of the history. Thank you for that.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you for that summary. I wish I could remember exactly what you said, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be pressing pause, rewind, and just to hear that exact coverage again, because it sounds like you've just beautifully summed up in a couple of minutes exactly what's going on. And for so many people, that's like, I think you've just answered like a lot of questions that have gone unanswered, and like people are asking, the health department, the government, and their doctors, what's going on. And thank you for providing such
Sure,
a
yeah.
nice answer for that. That was very, very like I'm sort of sitting back just going, wow. You've obviously done your homework, so thank you for that. You mentioned in that response a couple of different treatments that were used, that have been using medical cannabis, and you even mentioned someone who sued the government and won for glaucoma. Can you talk about some other disorders and symptoms that medical cannabis is being used for?
Yeah. So, as far as medical cannabis goes, the way that it works is that we have what's called the endocannabinoid system in our bodies. Everybody has it. It's a normal system in our bodies, and it really helps to maintain homeostasis, normal functioning. It really extends to all the organ systems, especially neurologically. It has a big role in the neurological system. This is the same system, for example, that causes the runner's high. When you hear this term, it's actually the endocannabinoid system in the brain. So given the extent of the endocannabinoid system throughout so many areas in the body, subsequently there's been a lot of research showing, potential benefit in many areas of the body as well. And a lot of this obviously requires research and, more confirmation. But I think pretty much every organ system in the body, there's been research suggesting potential benefit. The degrees in different areas are variable. But glaucoma, for example, there's evidence that it decreases the pressure in the eye, and that's why it works in that. But there's indications for everything from anxiety, depression, to irritable bowel, to gastrointestinal, to cancer, and so there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot to be done, but basically every organ system seems to be a potential target. There's a very strong role that the endocannabinoid system plays in pain, which is really what the interest is that kind of spiked my interest. And the majority of the research that has shown very positive effects really has been in chronic pain syndromes. And these have mostly been chronic neuropathy, nerve pain disorders, chronic pain and muscle spasms and spasticity and multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injury, chronic cancer pain. There's been some also in rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia and these other chronic pain syndromes. So there's actually been some good evidence for those chronic pain disorders.
So given all the practical or potential uses for medicinal cannabis, why is it such a heated subject?
Well, I think the issue is that the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, continues to classify it as Schedule I substances, or of the most dangerous type. They lump it in with these other substances, LSD, heroin, which are clearly of no benefit, generally speaking. And they continue to claim there's no benefit and there's very high potential for abuse. So the interesting thing is that in 2003, the U.S. government obtained a patent for cannabinoids, which is the therapeutic aspects of marijuana. And they received this patent for cannabinoids for treatment of antioxidants and as neuroprotectants. And the FDA has also approved 2 synthetic versions of the cannabinoid THC, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but they've approved this for medicinal purposes. This is dronabinol and nabilone, and these are primarily used for nausea, especially chemotherapy-related nausea, vomiting, AIDS-related wasting syndrome, and appetite, improving appetite, those kind of things. So there seems to be some paradox as far as claims that there's no medicinal benefit, yet they've obtained a patent for the medicinal benefit, and they have approved some synthetic versions of marijuana extracts for medical purposes. So it's just an interesting play between those two aspects.
Yeah, it seems like on one hand they're saying, no, this is like the most illegal substance you can possibly have. And at the other hand, they're gearing up for a mass